Hello, and welcome to Module number 5 of Exam 70 411, Implementing a Group Policy Infrastructure. This lesson is about introducing group policy. A group policy infrastructure has several interacting components, and you need to understand what each component does, as well as how they work together and how you can assemble them into different configurations. This lesson provides a comprehensive overview of group policy components, procedures, and functions. In this video, we will identify the business requirements for configuration management, describe the core components and terminology of group policy, explain the benefits of implementing GPOs, describe GPOs, explain the function and behavior of the client-side GPO components, explain GPO refresh, and create and configure GPOs. So, let's start by explaining configuration management. If you have only one computer in your environment, at home, for example, and you need to modify the desktop background, you can achieve that in several different ways. With a right-click on the desktop and then go to Personalize, you can change the desktop background as you wish, or even change the desktop icons. For example, if we don't want our recycle bin to be shown, we just uncheck it and then click Apply. And the recycle bin icon is now gone. While that works well for one computer, it may be tedious if you want to make the change across multiple computers. Implementing any change and maintaining a consistent environment is more difficult with multiple computers. Configuration management is a centralized approach to applying one or more changes to one or more users or computers. The key elements of configuration management are setting. A setting is also known as a centralized definition of a change. The setting brings a user or a computer to a desired state of configuration. So, if you apply the control panel on our desktop, this is a setting. Scope. The scope of the change is the ability to change the user's computers. So, we have the ability to change our user's computer. And application is a mechanism or process that ensures that the setting is applied to users and computers within the scope. In this case, we are using desktop icon settings under Control Panel. Group policy is a framework within Windows with components that reside in Active Directory domain services, on domain controllers, and on each Windows server and client that enables you to manage the configuration in an ADDS domain. So, if we want to make permanent changes to a full set of computers, we must go to our domain controller. And here, under Tools, we have our Group Policy Management, as you can see. And here is where all the settings are applied. As we can see, here is our forest. And then we have our domain. And all the organizational units which reside on our Active Directory. If you go to Tools, Active Directory Users and Computers, we can also see the computers container, Lost and Found, System, and other containers. But these are containers, and group policy doesn't apply on containers. It applies on organizational units. Group policy objects by default are stored at the Group Policy Objects container. And with every new installation of ADDS, we have by default 2 new policies. The first one is Default Domain Controller Policy, and this policy applies to all the domain controllers on our domain. So, it is connected with this one. And the second one is Default Domain Policy. As you can see here, it is connected to the entire domain. So, the settings here are applied throughout the domain, including computers, domain controllers, and users. Everything that is beneath this node here. So, let's now try to make a new GPO. Right-click, New. Let's give it a meaningful name. In this case, we are going to make some desktop changes or restrictions. Let's click OK. This new GPO is created. Let's try to modify it. Right-click it, Edit. Let me maximize it. As you can see now, we have seen this snap-in at our gpedit.msc on our desktop computers. It is the same as the local group policy. The policies are applied in two levels. The first level is the computer configuration. All the settings that are configured here apply to the computers when the computer starts up. And the second one is applied to the user configuration node. And these policies here apply when the user first logs on. So, if we want some policies to be enabled for computers, we must specify them here. And if we want some settings to be applied to the users, we must apply to the user configuration. And of course, a computer policy has no effect if the changes or settings made are not applied to the organizational unit that contains computers. So, if we make a change here under Policies of Computer Configuration, and we link this GPO to a user's organizational unit, that policy does not apply. So, a GPO must be connected to that specific user's or computer's OU. Here, as you can see, we have our software settings, which we are going to explain in a later module. We have Windows settings, such as settings regarding security, account policies, local policies, some of them we have already seen. And also, we have administrative templates for settings applied to control panel, network, printers, and such. So, in our case, our desktop setting will be applied to the user. So let's go to the user configuration. Under Policies, we have our Windows settings and administrative templates. Here, we want to make some changes to the desktop. Let's go to Desktop. If you click here on the first column, the group policy objects will be sorted alphabetically. As you can see, by default, their state is not configured. This means that the GPO cannot modify the existing configuration of that particular setting for a user or computer. In our case, we want to remove Recycle Bin icon from the desktop. Double-click it, and here we will see our setting. If you enable it, this policy is going to take effect, and the Recycle Bin icon will be removed from the desktop. Or, if you disable it, if another policy requires that recycle bin to be removed, by choosing Disable, two negatives make a positive. So, when you choose Disabled, if you are not sure what has happened with other group policy objects, we can just click Apply. This way, we can make sure that the recycle bin icon will be shown on users' desktops. In this case, we are going to remove it. Let's click Apply. As you can see now, there is no Save button. As soon as you configure a setting, it applies automatically. For example, we can also remove the computer icon on the desktop if we want. Removing the computer icon is useful on a kiosk computer, where we don't want the users to mess with our computer settings. Let's click Enable. And let's click OK. As you can see, this GPO is updated. But it has no effect, since it is not connected to any particular organizational unit. We may drag and drop it to that organizational unit we want to apply it. Or, let's say that we are going to apply it to the Tirana OU. We can drag and drop it, click OK on the confirmation box, and now, if you go to Tirana, the newly created GPO is enabled. Another way to link a GPO to an OU is if you go to that particular OU. For example, under Albania, right-click it. Here we can link to an existing GPO, and from here, we are going to choose which GPO must be linked. And let's click OK. If we don't want the specific GPO to be linked, we can delete it. Right-click it, and then delete it. And this GPO is not applied anymore. Of course, Tirana OU has that GPO in place. So now let's switch quickly to our Windows 8 client and see the effect of that GPO. Here we are at our Windows 8. As you can see, our recycle bin is still here. For some policies, if it is a user-based policy, in order for them to take effect, the user must first log off and then log on. And if it is a computer policy, that computer must be restarted, so that policy takes effect during the boot up process. So let's go to Start and let's sign out. Let's log on again. Let's go to our desktop, and as we can see now, the recycle bin icon is disappeared. Let's try to go to Personalize under Change Desktop Icons. As you can see now, neither computer nor recycle bin icons can be activated. They are grayed out, since the group policy we just created is in effect. So, the users cannot show the recycle bin icon on their desktop. The same goes for the computer icon too. But of course, they can show their files and the network icons. Here we are again at our group policies. Let's describe some of the benefits of using group policy. Group policies are very powerful administrative tools. You can use them to push various settings to a large number of users and computers, because you can apply them to various levels from local to domain. You can also focus these settings very precisely. Primarily, you can use group policies to configure settings that you do not want users to configure. As we showed it, we remove the recycle bin icon from our desktop. Additionally, you can use group policies to standardize desktop environments on all computers in an OU or in an entire enterprise to provide additional security and some advanced system settings, and for other purposes that the following sections will detail. We can apply security settings. For example, let's say that we want to restrict access to our CD-ROM. Here, we can see security options under Local Policies. And from here, we can restrict CD-ROM access to locally logged on users only. We can enable this policy, and the CD-ROM access will be denied to all users of that Gpo scope. Or use other settings, as we can see here. Also, we can configure system services. If we want a specific service to run automatically on each client computer, we can enable it from here. Let's say that the DHCP client service must be running on all client computers. So, we can make it automatic, and the DHCP client will be running on all client computers. We can specify additional registry values if we want. Right-click it, Add Key, and add that specific registry value to all machines. We can apply firewall rules. For example, if we want to allow an inbound rule. Let's say that we want a remote desktop port to be allowed on all our client machines' firewalls. The port is 3389. Let's click Next. And let's allow this connection. So, all our client computers will have the remote desktop port allowed. We can also specify other settings related to network, application control policies, and such. But, as a best practice, it is suggested that we use different group policy objects for different settings. Since this was a group policy specific for the desktop restrictions, we don't want to make other changes besides that. So, if we want to make some security settings, it is suggested to create a new GPO. Let's name it Security Settings. And under this new GPO, we can apply the security settings that we want the users to have. So in this case, if for some reason something goes wrong, or we want to trace back a misconfiguration by having them separated, we can easily know where to go and look for that incorrect setting. Now, let's talk about the Gpo Scope. Configuration is defined by policy settings in GPOs. However, the configuration changes in a GPO do not affect computers or users in your organization until you specify the computers or users to which the GPO applies. This is called scoping a GPO. The scope of a GPO is the collection of users and computers that will apply the settings in a GPO. You can use several methods to manage the scope of GPOs. The first is the Gpo Link, as we showed. You can link GPOs to sites, domains, and OUs in ADDS. The site, domain, or OU then becomes the maximum scope of the GPO. All computers and users within the site, domain, or OU, including those in child OUs, such as Elbasan, Gramsh, and Tirana, will be affected by these configurations that the group policy settings in the GPO specify. You can link a GPO to more than one domain, OU, or site. Linking GPOs to multiple sites can introduce performance issues when the policy is being applied, and you should avoid linking a GPO to multiple sites. This is because in a multi-site network, the GPOs are stored in the domain controllers of the forest root domain. The consequence of this is that computers in other domains may need to traverse a slow wide area network link to obtain the GPOs. It is important to understand how group policies apply on client computers. First, when group policy refresh begins, a service that is running on all Windows-based computers, known as the Group Policy Client in Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 2008 R2, and Windows Server 2012, determines which GPOs apply to the computer or user. And then, this service downloads any GPOs that are not cached already. And the third step is that client-side extensions, CSEs, interpret the settings in a GPO and make appropriate changes to the local computer or to the currently logged-on user. There are client-side extensions for each major category of policy setting. For example, there is a security CSE that applies security changes, a CSE that executes startup and logon scripts, and so on. And to change these settings, we can go to our group policy object. Under Administrative Templates, under Computer Configuration, we have our system. And here, we have our group policy. Here, we can specify different settings for different group policies. For example, if there is a slow link detection, we can enable it. So, if the link connection speed is below 500 kilobits per second, that GPO will not be processed. We can increase it or decrease it. Or we can disable it. On the right pane, we can see the explanation of this policy. These policies can be viewed extended here, or we can view them as standard, with no explanation. And we must open each one to see the explanation. For example, we can configure the folder redirection policy processing. When this occurs, we can allow it, even if the network connection is slow, or if the group policy objects have not changed. Just click OK. The Security CSE manages an important exception to the default policy processing settings. Security settings are reapplied every 16 hours, even if a GPO has not changed. It is recommended that we enable under System, Logon, to always wait for the network at computer startup and log on. Let me maximize it. Without this setting, by default, Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, and Windows 8 clients perform only background refreshes. This means that a client may start up, and then a user might sign in without receiving the latest policies from the domain. This setting is located in Computer Configuration. So, if we enable this setting, the computer will take all the GPOs and later allow the user to be logged on successfully. So, let's click OK. Policy settings in the computer configuration. Here we are at Computer Configuration. Policy settings are applied at system startup, and then every 90 to 120 minutes thereafter. User configuration policy settings are applied at logon, and then every 90 to 120 minutes thereafter. The application of policies is called Group Policy Refresh. You can also apply them manually. If you want the changes you made to be applied quickly, there are two ways. The first is from the client side. We can write here gp update /force. This forces the group policy update process to take place. First, it does the computer policy update, and then the user configuration. Now, the new GPO changes are applied to this client computer. And the second method, if we go to our domain controller, and we want a specific setting to be applied, we can right-click on the organizational unit, and from here, we can initiate Group Policy Update. But in order for this policy to take effect, this OU must contain also the computer objects. We don't have the computer objects here. The computer objects are at the computer container. We can choose to move the computer objects inside that OU. Or, if it was a domain controller policy change, we can go under Domain Controllers, right-click it, and go to Group Policy Update. It found 3 domain controllers. Let's click Yes, and now the update process will begin. If, for some reason, one of the computers is off, such as our DCO2, that forced Group Policy Update will not be applied. So, this way we can initiate a Group Policy Update throughout our domain without having to go to each client and run that gp update /force command. In this video, we showed you how to identify the business requirements for configuration management, describe the core components and terminology of group policy, explain the benefits of implementing GPOs, explain the function and behavior of the client-side GPO components, explained GPO refresh, and created and configured GPOs. Let's have a quick peek at our coming video. In the next video, we will continue our look at implementing a group policy infrastructure with a look at implementing and administering GPOs. I thank you for watching this video, and please have a look at your assignment for this module.